She was on her knees beside her father's casket when the slap came. Her stepmother's hand cracked across her face so hard the whole room went silent. All because she'd helped an old man in a wheelchair get through the door of the community center where they were holding the funeral. What nobody knew, not even her, was that the old man wasn't helpless at all. He was her father's attorney, testing who really deserved what was coming. And when he stood up from that wheelchair 2 days later and told her she'd just inherited everything her father built, her stepmother's face went from brown to ash gray. The woman who just humiliated her in front of the whole neighborhood was about to lose it all. If you're loving this already, hit that subscribe button right now. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know if you're Team Justice or Team Mercy. The sound didn't fade quickly. It bounced off the walls of the New Hope Community Center and seemed to hang there waiting for somebody to do something about it. But nobody moved. Amara Okafor stayed on her knees, one hand still resting on the wooden casket where her father lay. Her other hand held the folded program with his picture on it, the one where he was smiling in his good shirt, the one he wore to church and funerals. Now it was his own funeral, and the irony wasn't lost on anybody. Across from her stood Chidma, her stepmother, breathing hard as she'd just run a race. Her fingers were still shaking from the force of it. She wasn't angry, not really. She was scared of losing control, scared of what people might think if they saw weakness. "You embarrassed us," Chidma hissed, her voice cutting through the whispers. "On today of all days." Amara turned her head slowly. Her cheek burned, but her eyes were calm. She'd learned a long time ago that reacting only made things worse. After her father married Chidma 6 years back, the house became a place where you moved quietly and spoke less. Behind them, near the door, the old man in the wheelchair sat waiting. Rain dripped from his wheels onto the linoleum floor. His jacket was torn at the elbow, his shoes didn't match, and his hands were folded in his lap like he was apologizing just for being there. When Amara had seen him struggling with the door 10 minutes earlier, she'd noticed what everyone else ignored. The way the funeral attendant pretended not to see him. The way Chidma's eyes slid past him was like he was invisible. The way people who'd known her father for years suddenly got real busy looking at their phones. Amara had stood up from her seat in the front row, walked past her stepmother's glare, and pushed the door open wide. "Come on in," she'd said softly. "There's space." That small moment, barely worth mentioning, now sat heavy in the room like smoke. Chidinma turned to the crowd, her hand pressed to her chest. "Y'all forgive her," she said, voice dripping with false concern. "Grief makes people act crazy." Amara stood up. Not fast, not slow, just steady. The same way she'd moved through life since her mother died when she was 12, and her father brought home a new woman who smiled in public and cut with words in private. She looked at the casket one more time. Ezekiel Okafor, community builder, business owner, a man who'd started with nothing and built something. To the neighborhood, he was a legend. To Amara, he was complicated, a father who was there but distant, who watched but rarely spoke. Her cheeks still stung. Good. Pain kept her present, kept the memories from dragging her under. A flash came anyway. She was 16, standing in her father's small office behind the barber shop, holding a bank statement she wasn't supposed to see. Chidma's voice behind her, smooth as oil. "You gotta understand, Amara. This ain't personal. It's just business." That word business had followed her everywhere since. Business decisions were made without her. Business conversations she wasn't invited to. A business that somehow always benefited Chidinma. Now that same woman stood in her black dress and expensive wig, having just slapped her in front of everybody who mattered. Amara met Chidinma's eyes. No anger in her expression, no fear, just recognition. "I'm sorry," Amara said quietly. Chidinma blinked, confused. But Amara wasn't apologizing for helping the old man. She was apologizing for what was about to come. The service continued, but it never recovered. Words were said, prayers lifted. People kept sneaking glances at Amara's face, which was already swelling. Nobody came to check on her. Sympathy had limits in this neighborhood. Only the old man in the wheelchair kept watching her, and his gaze didn't feel grateful. It felt deliberate. When people started filing out, phones came out too. The slap was already traveling through group chats, shedding context with every forward. Amara stood near the exit, listening to the rain start up again outside. Behind her, the wheelchair creaked. "Miss Okafor," a voice said. She turned. The old man looked up at her, and his eyes weren't cloudy anymore. They were sharp, focused. "Thank you," he said, "for earlier." Amara nodded. Of course. She didn't know why his stare lingered. Didn't know why her chest tightened, not with fear, but with the strange feeling of being truly seen. None of them knew yet that decisions had already been made. Those files had been opened months ago. That kindness once witnessed couldn't be forgotten. The room emptied. The rain got louder. And the test was already over. Wonder what happens next? Keep watching. This story is about to flip everything you think you know. The will reading was set for 2 days later. Not because of tradition, but because Ezekiel Okafor never believed in wasting time. He used to say that waiting made people soft, made them forget what they really wanted. The notice came through email. Same message to everyone, a law office address on the east side, a time and a line that said attendance was mandatory for claim verification. Amara read it once on her phone, then deleted it. She would have gone anyway. Showing up was what she did. The law office was in one of those old buildings that had been renovated but still smelled like history. Wood polish, and old paper. On the morning of the reading, the sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Everything looked sharper, like the world had been wiped clean. Kadinma arrived early. She always did. Control started with being first, picking the seat, setting the tone, and making people adjust to you. She wore gray instead of black. Mourning was over. Now came positioning. Her lawyer, a thin man named Bernard who talked too much and charged too little, leaned close and whispered reassurances she barely heard. Her eyes were on the long table, the folders placed at each seat. Amara's name was printed on one of them, the same size as hers. That bothered her more than it should have. Amara came in quietly, no announcement, no escort. Same coat from the funeral, though she'd wiped the blood off the cuff where her nails had dug into her palm afterward. Her cheek had faded from red to a dull yellow-brown. She hadn't bothered covering it. A few people glanced her way. Nobody spoke. She took her seat and folded her hands. Didn't look at Chidinma. Didn't look at the lawyers. Her eyes settled on a framed quote on the wall. "Character is what you do when nobody's watching." Her father's words. The door opened. The old man from the funeral walked in. No wheelchair this time. The room went still. He walked smoothly, upright and deliberate. He wore a dark suit that fit him perfectly and carried a briefcase that looked almost empty but somehow felt heavy. Whispers started. Someone gasped. "Wait, that's—" The man set the briefcase down at the head of the table. "My name is Obina Nwankwo," he said, his voice steady and unhurried. "Senior executor of the Ezekiel Okafor estate. No dramatics. No reviel. Just a fact." Kaidenma's face went tight, then smoothed out fast. "I don't understand," she said carefully. "You were being tested," Nwankwo replied. "A process your husband put in place 14 months ago." He opened the briefcase. Inside were more folders, identical to the ones already on the table. "Mr. Okafor believed that character shows clearest when there's no reward in sight," Nwankwo continued, "especially when kindness costs you something." Amara sat still, didn't move, didn't react. Nwankwo glanced at her once, briefly neutral, then turned back to the room. "The will is structured in stages," he said. "We'll go through them one by one." He pressed something on the tablet in front of him. Phones buzzed all around the table. Emails are dropping at the same time. Subject lines popped up. Account status update. Authorization change. Asset transfer notice. Bernard frowned at his phone, scrolling fast. "This has to be a mistake." Nwankwo didn't answer right away. He waited until everyone had seen it. "The Okafor Family Trust has been activated," he said. Another buzz. Louder this time. A woman at the end of the table stood up fast. "My access is—" Yes, Nwankwo said. Access has been reassigned. Chidma's phone rang. She ignored it. Then it rang again and again. What is this? She asked, her voice sharp now. Nwankwo looked directly at her. This, he said, is your husband's final decision. Made while he still had hope you'd prove him wrong. He slid a document across the table. Not to Chidma, to Amara. Amara reached for it without hesitating. The first line wasn't a dollar amount. It was a sentence, handwritten and scanned into the record. If you're reading this, then someone chose right when it would have been easier not to. Her fingers tightened just once, then relaxed. Around her, the room started breaking apart. Bernard's phone buzzed again. He went pale. Kaidenma, he whispered. Your accounts, they're frozen. Frozen? She snapped. What do you mean frozen? All corporate privileges revoked, Nwankwo said. Pending review. Review of what? Of everything. Amara sat still, didn't smile, didn't look shocked, just listened. The power shift didn't explode. It happened quietly, through emails, through authorizations, through systems correcting themselves after years of looking the other way. And for the first time since the funeral, Amara understood something clear. This wasn't a gift. It was a reckoning already in motion. Are you feeling that tension? Drop a like if you're hooked, and trust me, it gets wilder. The meeting ended without ceremony. Nwankwo closed his folder, stood, and left the same way he came, calm, unbothered. The door clicked shut behind him, and that sound felt more final than any gavel. Nobody followed. Kaidenma sat frozen for 10 full seconds. 10 seconds was forever for a woman who was never last at anything. Her phone kept buzzing, but each vibration got shorter, like even the phone was giving up. Amara stood when it felt right, when chairs scraped, when people pretended things were normal. She picked up the single document Nwankwo had slid to her and placed it carefully in her bag. She didn't look at Chidinma. That hurt worse than any words could. Amara. Kaidenma's voice cracked on the name. She stood now unsteady. You knew. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation trying to become an excuse. Amara paused. Didn't turn all the way around. Just enough to acknowledge the sound. I knew my father, she said. That's all. Chidinma laughed, sharp, bitter. Don't do that. Don't act like this wasn't planned. Amara met her eyes then. Her face was unreadable, not cold, not kind, just present. Planning means intent, Amara said. I just showed up. She left. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars honked. Somebody's music thumped from a passing car. A man sold water bottles on the corner. Power had shifted. Empires had changed hands. And the world didn't even pause. Amara's phone buzzed. Okafor Family Trust. Executive access granted. Board meeting scheduled. 24 hours. She turned the phone face down and kept walking. That night, Amara sat in her small apartment in the same neighborhood she grew up in. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, old carpet, a kitchen where the sink leaked if you ran it too long. She'd never moved into her father's house after he married Chidinma. Distance had been her only control. Now, distance was disappearing. Emails poured in. People who'd never responded to her before suddenly found her contact. She ignored all of them. Instead, she opened the secure file Nwankwo had unlocked and started reading. There were layers she hadn't expected. LLCs hidden inside nonprofits. Silent partnerships. Money moved in circles that looked clean but weren't. And underneath it all, a pattern, not of generosity, of watching. Her father had been paying attention for a long time. Amara closed the laptop just after midnight. She dreamed of the funeral, not the slap. The moment before, when she reached for the door and felt the choice settle into her hand. In the dream, she hesitated. In the dream, she walked away. She woke up with her heart pounding. The next morning, Chidinma's world kept shrinking. Her car service didn't show. Her cards declined. The doorman at her building hesitated before letting her through, eyes flicking to a screen she couldn't see. When she called Bernard, his assistant said he was unavailable and asked if she could try next week. By noon, the blogs had it. Okafor estate shakeup. Widow loses control in surprise succession. Speculation filled in where facts were missing. Kaidenma sat alone in the house she'd redecorated twice and no longer owned. At 3 in the afternoon, her phone rang. She answered on the first ring. "I want to talk," she said before the other person could speak. Silence. Then Amara's voice. Calm, distant. "About what?" "You destroyed me," Kaidenma said, the words coming out flat. "Empty, and you did it quietly. That's worse." Amara closed her eyes. Not in pain, in acknowledgement. "You weren't destroyed," she said. "You were corrected." Long silence. "You let him test me," Kaidenma said. "You stood there and let him humiliate me." Amara leaned against the kitchen counter. "I didn't know who he was." "Neither did you." "You always knew you were different." Amara thought about that. Different isn't the same as ready. Another pause. Heavier this time. "Did you want this?" Kaidenma asked. Not accusing now. Afraid. Amara didn't answer right away. "I don't know yet," she said finally. The call ended. Amara stood in her kitchen long after, phone still in her hand, facing a truth she hadn't expected. Power answered questions she never asked. And now she had to live with the answers. If this story is hitting different, subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. 3 weeks later, Amara stood in front of a boardroom that felt like a freezer. Not the temperature, the design. All glass and steel and space between people. The table could have sat 40. Only 12 showed up. Amara took the center seat. Nobody objected. Obina Nwankwo stood to her right, tablet in hand. He didn't introduce her. Didn't need to. The first thing on the agenda wasn't profits. It was accountability. "Over the last 10 years, Nwankwo said, several accounts were used in ways that went beyond their stated purpose. Screens lit up around the room. Charts. Tummelings. Transactions stripped of excuses and presented as evidence. Amara watched in silence. A man at the end of the table cleared his throat. These were approved under Mrs. Okafor's authority. At the time, they were within an acceptable range. "Acceptable isn't the same as right," Nwankwo replied. Amara shifted slightly. The movement pulled every eye to her. "Pause," she said. The screens froze. Silence gathered around her like it had been waiting. "How many people lost their jobs when these funds got moved?" she asked. Nwankwo glanced at his tablet. "Around 800. Indirectly more." Amara nodded once. "Bring them back." Confusion rippled through the room. "That would require undoing several active restructures." "I know," Amara said. "Do it anyway. No anger." No explanation, just instruction. Emails started sending before anyone could argue. The board moved forward, unsettled. After the meeting, Nwankwo walked with Amara down the hall that overlooked the neighborhood. From up here, people look small. Movement without faces. "You could have left things as they were," he said. "Nobody would have questioned you." Amara stopped, rested her hands on the railing. "That's the problem," she said. "Nobody was questioning anything." Nwankwo studied her. "Your father believed pressure reveals truth." "Yeah," Amara said. "Pressure also breaks things that were never supposed to carry it." He said nothing. 3 weeks later, Amara stood in a warehouse that used to sit empty. Now it hummed with work again. Forklifts moved. People called out to each other. Lunch trucks lined the street outside. A man approached her, wiping grease off his hands. "They told us you brought us back," he said. "That we got our jobs again." Amara nodded. He hesitated. "Why?" The question landed heavier than thanks. Amara considered several answers. None felt complete. "Because it was wrong," she said. He smiled, not grateful, relieved. "That's rare," he said. Somebody just saying that without a whole speech behind it. That night, Amara sat in one of her father's houses for the first time. It was too big, too quiet, filled with furniture that looked expensive but felt cold. In his office, she found a locked drawer. Inside was a notebook with her name on the first page, written in her father's handwriting. She read until the sun came up. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a confession. It was a record, observations, doubts, plans within plans. Pages about people he'd trusted, then crossed out. Pages questioning if wealth could ever be passed down without corrupting something. One part stopped her cold. If you're reading this after I'm gone, then you've been tested by circumstances I created. I hope I was wrong to think this was necessary. I'm afraid I wasn't." Amara closed the notebook. For the first time since the will reading, something inside her cracked. Not outwardly. Just a pressure behind her eyes she refused to name. The next morning, Stepmother showed up unannounced. She looked smaller. Not weaker, just reduced. "You planned this," Stepmother said once they sat down. "No games. No masks left." "My father did," Amara said. "I just was myself." "Convenient," Stepmother said. "You won either way." "Yeah," Amara replied. "That's what makes it hard." Stepmother laughed softly. "You don't get to feel guilty and powerful at the same time." Amara met her eyes. "Why not?" Silence filled the space between them. Stepmother stood. "You won, but don't pretend you didn't want to." After she left, Amara sat there long after the door closed. The systems had worked. Injustices were being corrected. The business was stable. But for the first time, Amara wondered if precision without mercy was just another kind of inheritance she never chose, but now carried. This story isn't over yet. Hit subscribe if you want to see how it ends. 18 months later, things were quiet. That was the victory. The Okafor businesses ran smoothly. Disputes dropped. Audits passed. Amara's name appeared in headlines only when necessary, usually next to words like steady, effective, or unemotional. She wasn't photographed smiling. She wasn't asked to speak at leadership events. The market trusted her. People weren't sure. Amara watched a quarterly report from her smaller office, not the main one. The numbers meant something now. She understood what had been torn apart to build them back. Nwankwo stood at the front of the room. Older now, or maybe just tired. "The transition is complete," he said. "By every measure, the estate is healthy." Haplos, polite, professional. Amara didn't clap. Afterward, Nwankwo met her in the hall. "You succeeded where most would have failed," he said. "That's not flattery. That's a fact." She nodded. "Facts balance eventually." He studied her. "And personally?" Amara thought longer than she should have. "I sleep," she said. "Just not deep." A month later, she got a letter. Handwritten. That alone made it disruptive. The sender was a man whose department had been cut during the early freezes. Not corrupt. Not innocent. Just caught. "You were right to fix things. But my son doesn't believe systems care about fairness anymore. He thinks they only care about what works. I don't know if you taught him that or the world did. I just know he learned it when we lost everything." Amara folded the letter and put it in the drawer with her father's notebook. That night, she stood outside the community center where the funeral had been. Same steps, same doors. She stood where she'd knelt 18 months ago and tried to remember the exact weight of that moment. The innocence, the simplicity. She couldn't. Memory had been edited by consequence. Her phone buzzed. Ethics review closed. No action required. She turned it off. Later that week, she ran into Stepmother at a charity event. Not planned. Just life overlapping. Stepmother looked adjusted. Not recovered. Not defeated. Just there. "You built something impressive," Stepmother said, watching people move through the room. "It just doesn't love you back." Amara thought about that. "Did it ever love you?" Stepmother smiled faintly. "No, but I thought it needed me." Silence. "You know," Stepmother said, "if you'd stopped him, if you'd refused the test, you'd still be who you were that day." Amara met her eyes. "And how would I know that?" Stepmother shrugged. "You wouldn't. That's the cost." They parted without forgiveness. Months passed. Amara started funding something new. Not through the trust. Not under her name. A legal defense network for people hurt by restructures they never controlled. It ran quietly. Inefficient. Human. Nwankwo warned her it would never scale. "That's the point," Amara said. On the anniversary of her father's death, Amara returned to her old apartment. She sat at the same table where she'd once ignored emails that would have changed everything. She opened the notebook again. On the last page, in handwriting less steady than the rest, her father had written, "Power shows you who you are. It doesn't ask permission first." Amara closed the book. Outside, the city moved forward. Indifferent, operational, alive. She'd inherited an empire and dismantled a woman. She'd corrected injustices and created new wounds. She'd passed a test she never agreed to take. And in the quiet that followed, the question remained, not just for her, but for anyone watching. If mercy lets wrong survive, and justice requires cruelty to work, which failure do we live with? The empire endured. What would become? That was still unwritten. What do you think? Was she right? Was her father? Drop your thoughts below, and if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.